Welcome to the Jaico Podcast once again. Today we have Anuj Ghai next to us, who has written the book called Hindu Gods. This is our new release coming out in June 2026. So I hope you guys are gonna love this conversation, get to know a lot more, just like me, and we're super excited. So welcome to the podcast, Anuj.
Thank you for having me, Clinton.
We're so excited to get this conversation started. I mean, you live in the UK, so we had logistical issues for you to be able to, be here. But we're so grateful that you're here.
Likewise, I'm happy to be here.
Yes. So for the audience that don't know about you or don't know you as well, could you please tell them a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So as you said, I was born and brought up in the UK in a Hindu household. I've been practicing Hinduism my entire life. My intellectual interest in the religion, I think, deepened as I was studying or just before I went to college. And that's really when I started delving far more deeply into the sacred texts of Hinduism and studying the religion from a Western Indological scholarship perspective. I've been practicing Hinduism, as I say, the best part of my life. And even that practicing aspect, I think, deepened when I took formal initiation into a Vaishnava tradition a few years ago. I've been deeply interested by some of the questions I raise in this book for a number of years, and it was only really during COVID, as I say in the preface of the book, that I started embarking on that intellectual challenge of trying to find answers to questions that I'm sure a lot of Hindus have thought about and have grappled with as they practice their faith.
Right. And this is so exciting to me because I don't practice Hinduism, but just reading this book got me, so enticed, getting to know everything about, basically the book, if I'm not wrong, talks about how, gods, they were forgotten gods and how they evolved over time as the culture evolved and everything like that, right?
That is absolutely right. So the central question I'm trying to probe in this book is, what exactly explains the rise and decline of the Hindu pantheon, of the central Hindu gods that Hindus today worship or have worshipped? There are, not surprisingly, a range of responses to that question, but it does require that one delve very deeply into a range of evidence, including scriptural, textual evidence, but also what does the evidence from archaeology say? What does the evidence from numismatics say? That is the project that this book is really all about. So you're right to frame it in that way.
Yes. And also, like you said, it has bits of archaeology, mythology, everything coming together. So what I want to know is, how do you come up with the idea, and where was it that, of course, it's a COVID baby, like you mentioned in the book as well. So how did you, Anuj, a practicing Hindu, and then, come up with this idea, and how did it come to you?
I think my answer is fairly straightforward, actually. Anybody who has studied Hinduism by reviewing and reading Western scholarship will grapple with this question that often comes up, which is, why is it that certain gods are not referred to in the oldest strata of Hindu literature, the Vedas, whether it's the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, etc. Oftentimes, the response that Western scholars will adduce is that these gods were either invented at some stage in time to suit a particular need of a constituency, but usually that's the type of response offered. I thought that response was misplaced, and I thought there were resources within the tradition that could help us answer that question in a way that was more faithful to Hinduism, but also, I think, true to the evidence on offer. And that is really when I started thinking about that intellectually and in a far more disciplined manner. That's when I think I came across responses that that are ultimately presented in this book, that I think readers are going to find hopefully very helpful.
Right, because everybody has these questions, right? Like you said, every devout Hindu probably has these questions, and they grapple with it, but not everyone has the will to go that deep into it, study it, and find answers. Because usually, even with any kind of religion, it's like when you have these questions, people just be like, okay, these are questions that are unanswered in general, let me just leave it there. So what pushed you to go beyond that to find answers?
It was that tension internally, that I want to stay true to the tradition, but there are interesting, sensible questions that Western scholarship has raised that we should have responses to. I read a huge amount. I'm a voracious consumer of books on Hinduism, both traditional obviously Hindu texts, but also the best scholarship that's written, whether it's from scholars based out in Western academia, but also in India. And these are questions that recur over and over. And I thought, until I've investigated these questions for myself, I won't rest satisfied. So that's I think explains my impetus behind this book.
And it's great because everything that you did to find answers for yourself is now like in a form of a book, and now everybody who has the same questions will be able to get these answers.
I just want to say in response to that, the best thing about this project is that there is no one right answer, of course. I've presented what I think are sensible, reasonable, persuasive responses to these questions. Others may have different views. Others will find some of what I present as problematic. Others will be like, yes, absolutely, that's right. But this is, I think, designed to be a conversation starter rather than here are all the pieces to the puzzle.
Yeah, and I'm definitely sure that once people actually read the book and when they get the chance and once it's out, they'll probably find their way here to this podcast, and then they'll know that the author is not just straight away saying, okay, this is what I'm saying and just listen to it, as opposed to that he's just saying that, okay, it's a conversation starter, you can have debates about it, you can talk more about it, right?
Absolutely right.
So this is start of a movement, in a way,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So coming to the book, now I wanted to know, how long did it take you to do this specific project, and what is your research process like? Because for someone, like you said, you went deep into like the Rig Vedas and everything like that. So what's your research process like for people at home?
So it's a tricky question to answer, because in some respects, the research for this book has taken many, many years, because I've been reading, studying, savoring Hindu scripture for a long time. And that is obviously all research. It's why some of the chapters in this book, especially on Vishnu and Krishna, didn't take me that long to write, because I had that background knowledge that I had accumulated over the years. But in a sort of, I started formally undertaking disciplined research for this book during COVID. It took around 2 years to research the book, and then a year or so to write it. But as I say, that is really the culmination of a much longer engagement with the tradition.
And also coming to the different gods mentioned in the book, right? From my limited knowledge, I know that Vishnu is known as the all-powerful, and then Shiva is like they kind of position him as the counterpart, in a way, right? So how did what was the evolution of Vishnu as mentioned in the book? But since you know a lot more about it, and of course you've put in the subject matter, I want to know for somebody who does not know much about it, any way you can explain the evolution of Vishnu?
Absolutely. Vishnu's career, and I use that word intentionally, we can come back to it in a second, begins in the Rig Veda. So Vishnu, unlike other deities mentioned in the book, is mentioned a few times in the Rig Veda, but definitely not as the most important deity. That position goes to Indra or Agni. Vishnu is referred to as the taker of the 3 great strides. It's not very clear, if you read the Rig Veda as a standalone text, it's not very clear what those 3 steps actually signifies. You can interpret it in various ways, but that is his primary mythic exploit in the Rig Veda. He is the taker of the 3 strides. He is still, there is an enigma around Vishnu in the Rig Veda, because some of the petitions that the Rig Vedic poets make to Vishnu make very clear that they see the deity as a protector of sorts, which is significant, right? They're not really directing the same type of petition to the other beings, especially not to Shiva. We'll come on to that in a second. And so there is this enigmatic quality around Vishnu that is very obvious in the Rig Veda, but it's still true to say that if you read this from a face value perspective, the Rig Veda does not appear to position Vishnu as the supreme deity. That is an epithet, and that is an attribute that he will come to assume later. So he starts his career, as I say, as an important but relatively minor deity in the Rig Veda. I've explained what his primary mythic exploit was. Very soon thereafter, Vishnu does ascend into, I would say, enormous significance. There is a strata of Hindu literature called the Brahmanas, which is in effect, represents the coming together of Brahmin communities, trying to reflect on the ritual system of sacrifice, trying to understand its deeper meanings. And in those texts, in the Brahmanas, the Satapatha Brahmana is one example, probably the most prominent of the Brahmanas. Vishnu is identified as sacrifice. He is, the institution of sacrifice is set to be identical with Vishnu, and that is actually very significant. It may not appear obviously why that's the case, but if you take a step back and just think for a second of how important the rite of sacrifice is in early Vedic religion, to say that Vishnu is sacrifice is to say something very significant about the deity. And really it was from the Brahmanas onwards that communities, I think, started to get together and really positioned Vishnu as in many respects, as not just an important deity, but at least according to some communities, the most important. And you see that mythology develop, certainly in the Upanishads, but more, I think, forcefully in the Puranas. Vishnu's avatars are mentioned in great detail, but it's unlike some of the other deities, I would say Vishnu's ascension to supremacy occurs very early on. That's not something you can say about some of the other gods mentioned.
Right, because based on what I read from the book, it starts off as Vishnu or the other, the more bigger gods, like you would say, or the more prominent gods, not being mentioned as much in the Rig Veda, but slowly they just evolve to become these, widely known gods now. For example, with Vishnu, what I was able to read from the book was that he was then positioned as like the eternal sacrifice, or right. I would say, would it be similar to Agni was the sacrifice?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, Agni is, I think, important in the Rig Veda, revolves around the fact that he is both the recipient of the sacrificial offerings, but also said to be the mediator of those offerings. He receives them and then conveys them to other divine beings. Yes. And obviously Vishnu starts to take on that role, which is why sometimes the fire is then called Vishnu Mukh, meaning the mouth of Vishnu. What you're doing is you are putting fires, sure, you're putting it into the fire, but the havis, the sacrificial offering is actually going to Vishnu. So you can already see just through that terminological change what is going on in the ground and how it is that Vishnu is developing in significance.
Right, and also, for Vishnu's, let's say, since you mentioned career, so his rise to the top, as one would say, was a test involved with a sage. So could you tell us a little bit more about that? Yes,
it's a very it's a playful story. I like it quite a bit, and it's common to hear this story in tales around Tirupati Venkateshwara Swami. But the story at its simplest is that I believe it was Markandeya Rishi had a discussion with another acquaintance around who was the most important of the Hindu deities. And to test this for himself, he approached each of them in turn. So he started with Lord Brahma, and he wasn't satisfied with Brahma's response. He moved on to Shiva, who was too busy engaged in lovemaking with Parvati. And so he was also dissatisfied with Shiva's response. He then moved to Vishnu, who was reclining, obviously on his serpent bed. Mahalakshmi was massaging Vishnu's feet. And in a burst of anger, the Rishi is said to have kicked Vishnu on the chest. And remember, the chest is traditionally where Lakshmi is said to reside.
Right.
Vishnu receives this kick, but he receives it very graciously. And his primary concern is not to chastise the Rishi, but instead to ask him, I hope you're okay. You've injured me clearly, but I hope your toe isn't hurt. And the Rishi loves this. The Rishi just, completely enamored by Vishnu after this. There is a connecting story here, which is why I mentioned Tirupati. As I said, Lakshmi is present on Vishnu's chest. She does not take too kindly to this insult. And so the mythic story is that Lakshmi decides, also in a fit of anger, to leave Vishnu, to leave the divine abode, travel to earth, where she becomes a princess. She becomes Padmavati. Vishnu follows in due course as Venkateshwara, and that is the sort of the mythical origin of Venkateshwara Swami in Tirupati and Padmavati.
Wow, so all of these are connected.
All of these are connected.
Wow, that's great. I did not honestly know that. And also because how did you come up on the idea of seeing them as careers? Because of course it's a career is a very modernized word, and I mean, I think before 50, 70 years we didn't have careers, right? So to connect an idea of careers with something so ancient, how do you come up with that?
I use it almost in a playful way. The idea is designed to convey how dynamic these beings are. As I've tried to explain, I think quite carefully in the preface, as a devout Hindu, I do not see the Hindu gods as clearly not as invented beings. I see them as dynamic, as responsive. I think the evolution that we keep describing is something that appears as an evolution to us. There are other ways to see this, and I think the most authentic from a traditional perspective is to see these as different manifestations of the same being. And these manifestations vary depending, I think, on the needs of the populace, right? How spiritually advanced are they? How much can they receive at that stage? Ultimately, all of these different elements, whether it's the mythology, whether it's the personas, all of these ultimately coalesce. And so we see this as an evolution, but it's also a form of manifestation. But it's dynamic. There is as I see it, there is a dynamic interplay that the gods are having with the devotees. I think that's something as Hindus we should celebrate. But to convey that sense of dynamism, I use the word careers.
Right. And specifically, like Vishnu had a journey of his own. You've also described Shiva's journey. Now, as much of what I know, I think Shiva is described to be, typically people use the word destroyer, and somebody that you should be fearful of. But where I see in the book where you begin Shiva's journey is from Rudra, like an outsider who was then, instead of worship, he was worshipped to just say that, okay, pass by our village, but don't do us any harm, right? So from going to Rudra to now being a god that's so loved, what was that journey like, if you could explain to us?
It's a great question. You've framed the problem, I think, very nicely. You're right. Rudra has this very ambiguous position in the Rig Veda. He is not typically portrayed as a gracious being. In fact, his wrath is feared by the poets of the Rig Veda. You can tell very palpably that they are concerned that if they do not worship Shiva properly, or Rudra properly, because that's the term by which he is known in the earliest texts, destruction could follow. And so there is this continuity between, the earliest vision of him in the Rig Veda as potentially destructive to his role, as a destroyer of the entire cosmos at the end of time. And so he's not worshipped in a gracious way, as let's say Vishnu is. He's viewed as potentially destructive, important, but potentially destructive. There is this very interesting point in the Rig Veda actually around Shiva, which is he is treated very obviously as an outsider in some respects. The poets say that any offering to Shiva should be left at the crossroads. The significance of this is the crossroads are considered traditionally to be a very inauspicious place.
Okay.
It's where the different directions converge. Traditionally, it's where inauspiciousness reigns supreme. And so it's marked out, Shiva's place is marked out in this inauspicious quarter. And that, I think, is designed to convey probably the poet's sense that actually this is an important divine being, but someone whose worship we need to get right. And he's treated almost with certainly not love or devotion, but I think he is worshipped out of fear initially. That is at least what the poems seem to suggest to us. There is another way of looking at this, though, which I think comes out in some of the later strata of the texts, and that is Shiva's, I think, enduring association with the inauspicious, right? He wanders the cremation ground. Even today, the Puranic image of Shiva is as this wandering, beggar-like individual with matted hair and ash smeared all over his body, with kapalikas, with a skull as an ornament. He continues to have this association with the inauspicious. But that's actually, in the minds of these Shaivites, those who worship and love Shiva, that's actually one of his great qualities. That is, this is a being, this is a divine Lord who does not shun the outsider, does not shun the inauspicious. He is present everywhere, whether that be auspicious or inauspicious. He is Lord not just of us humans, but also of animals, which is why he's called Pashupati. And it's that paradox at the heart of Shiva, which is, at least to my mind, made him arguably the most fascinating of the Hindu gods, and which is why the chapter on Shiva was so interesting. It's very difficult to work out precisely how it is that Shiva developed from the period of the Rig Veda to, let's say, the Upanishads in the way that he did. One of the, I think, sort of solutions I offer is that Shiva, there is no real mythology associated with Shiva in the Rig Veda. At least with Vishnu, you have this story of him taking the 3 strides, and in due time that is connected with the Puranic story of Ravana. But Shiva, there's very little mythology in the Rig Veda, which is helpful because it does mean that he has this capacity, as does Vishnu, to take on more symbol, more mythology later in his career. Yes.
And specifically, since you talked about, Pashupati, right? Shiva is, we would say, an alias or another name, let's say Pashupati. So you did talk about it a little bit in the book of where the first time is it that they discovered, these, I would say, illustrations, right, of him. But back in the day, they were not really sure, is what you said, right? They were not really sure that if that's Shiva, but a lot of people, assumed it to be Shiva.
It's a great question. Actually, it's very topical and very timely because the Indian Ministry of Culture has just released, I saw this yesterday or maybe the day before, released a tweet. It is I refer to it in the book, it is a steatite seal found in Mohenjo-daro of what we call a proto-Shiva. What John Marshall, who was then director of the Archaeological Survey of India, back a couple of centuries ago, identified as a form of proto-Shiva. It is a horned being sitting in a yogic posture. There are animals around him. There are sacred flora around. And the Ministry of Culture has released this tweet to say this is a form of Shiva, worshipped by the Indus Valley peoples.
Wow.
Whether that's true or not, and the reason I raise this is because a number of Western scholars have chimed in to say that's not Shiva. So if you follow social media, there's this raging debate going on: is this Shiva or not? I'm unsure, frankly. I don't think we can be so certain that it is. I understand why people have thought of that being as Shiva-like or as a proto-Pashupati, because this is a being seated, as I say, in yogic posture, appears to have an erect phallus, which is obviously something associated with Shiva as well, something we can come onto in a second. For John Marshall, that was a very important aspect of the seal, which led him to identify it as a proto-form of Shiva. But I think the evidence is uncertain, and I wouldn't be so sure to say that this is 100% a form of Shiva. I don't think we can tell at this stage until we can actually decipher the Indus Valley script. I think that it just may remain unanswered, unfortunately.
Yeah, and coming to the Indus Valley script specifically, since you mentioned, we just haven't been able to crack through it, right? Has there been no progress whatsoever?
There has been progress, but it's people are pushing, I think, at there's a tension here, right? Because we don't even know whether the scholarly question seems to be, what language does the script encode? The problem, I think, is we don't even know for sure if it is a language, right? There are symbols which may or may not encode a language. I suspect it does. I suspect this is a form of language. Scholars have argued for, a range of positions. Some view this as a proto-form of Dravidian. Others say this potentially is Sanskrit. there are good reasons why all of those could be true.
Yeah.
But we have no evidence at this stage to really be able to conclusively identify what language this does, what language the script encodes. And scholars have been looking at this now for quite a number of years. I don't know, maybe artificial intelligence will help us.
Exactly, that's what I was about to come to, because it's so fascinating, because there are so many things that sometimes make you wish you had a time machine
100%.
and you could just go back in time and just figure out what this is, because there's so many mysteries. Like I think now more than ever we've been finding so many different, like they say in some places underwater they found lost cities and things like that, which is so fascinating. And it's like you have the thing in front of you, you have the scripts in front of you, you have the scrolls, but you just can't decipher them.
Yeah.
So hopefully, I think with AI probably we can get to the bottom of that, quite literally. But specifically when it comes to the location that you mentioned, Mohenjo-daro, right? Now you have also mentioned a part about the baths.
Yes.
Right? And how that we can see something similar now with the Hindu temples.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So one of the key features of the Indus Valley civilization appear to be these great communal, what seem to be communal bathing spaces. And anybody who's traveled the length and breadth of India will obviously be familiar with ghats and sacred temple tanks. And so there is at least this apparent continuity in religious culture. Most scholars think of those bathing spaces identified in the Indus Valley sites as having some form of ritual significance. They could ultimately be forms of, early forms of swimming pools, but that's not the scholarly consensus. There does seem to be some ritual significance involved. And that's why I think people have seen this common thread with the tradition of having temple tanks, areas to bathe, to purify yourself before you engage in religious practice. So that is one aspect of continuity that is often highlighted by those who want to see continuity. This is a very fraught political question, because ultimately this all revolves around is this, what we call this Hindu civilization, is it continuous with the Indus Valley civilization, which is, more ancient, at least more indigenous, more rooted to the ground than potentially the Vedic Aryan civilization, which many scholars would say has arrived from outside the shores of India. I think a lot of it's a fraught political question, and that's why it's one that's exercising the minds of so many Hindus today.
Yeah, and specifically going to all of these things that you said, if you're talking in the space of continuity, was something that you found in, let's say, in the last decade that kind of baffled you, because you may have probably in the midst of your research seen something, okay, this is happening today, but the historical evidence of when it first started, is there something that kind of baffled or fascinated you?
So I'll stick with the Indus Valley civilization. We talked about what we'll call the proto-Pashupati seal. There's a very similar image found in a seal, and the seal also depicts what appear to be seven female figures. Most people say this is I say most people, a lot of people viewing that seal think of the Saptamatrikas in later Hindu tradition, also associated with Shiva. That, I think, is a powerful argument in favor of continuity.
Wow.
Because it does seem to me too much of a coincidence to have seven female figures.
Exactly.
And then the Saptamatrikas. And so, if indeed we're viewing that in the same way, then I think that is a powerful argument in favor of continuity. An argument in favor of discontinuity is the fact that there are the Indus Valley peoples did not appear to practice cremation. Instead, it looks like they buried their dead, which is obviously not how most Hindus treat post-mortem rites. So there are arguments for and against. And I think we should treat all of the arguments as speculative and as relatively uncertain.
Right, because it's so fascinating now that you're diving deep into this. And then the crux of the book, just touching upon the part where Lord Hanuman also appears a little bit late into it.
Yes.
So what was his evolution like? And from the first time that he's ever mentioned in any scripts or anywhere to right now?
Good question. And it's interesting, right? Because Hanuman may well be the most popular Hindu deity today, right? You will find temples to Hanuman every nook and corner of India, including giant monumental statues of Hanuman. I was reading one book recently which suggested that there are more monumental statues of Hanuman than there are of any other deity in the subcontinent, which is telling you something.
It's more than Vishnu or Shiva?
More than Vishnu or Shiva.
Would it be, now this is just practical, I don't know, I'm just putting this question out there, but could it be more than Vishnu and Shiva combined?
Potentially.
Wow.
Potentially. I mean, there are not that many of Vishnu, actually. Monumentally sized images, nor frankly of Shiva. And so I think quite comfortably Hanuman occupies that spot. So he's peerless in that respect. In terms of Hanuman's evolution then, so as you say, he's not mentioned in any of the Vedic texts as far as we're aware. The first time he is mentioned is in the Valmiki Ramayana. But his most prominent position, I think, really is fleshed out in the Sundarkand, which is a beautiful portion of the Ramayana which describes Hanuman's leap over to Lanka, his initial encounter with Sita, tender dialogues with her, his fiery destruction of Lanka, meeting with Ravana. That's when readers, I think, first encounter Hanuman. I mean, today, of course, Hanuman is ubiquitous, but at least as far as the textual record is concerned, that is Hanuman's first arrival on the scene. Valmiki clearly adores Hanuman, but his presentation of the deity is still to some extent subdued, especially when you compare it to later retellings. If you look at, for example, Goswami Tulsidas's Ramcharitmanas, which is the Avadi retelling, probably the most popular retelling of the Ramayana in India, Hanuman assumes a complete life of his own, right? He's considered to be absolutely the devotee par excellence, right? His conduct is exemplary in every respect. There is a Hanuman Chalisa, also reputed to be penned by Tulsidas, but probably wasn't, which is, dare I say, the most popular vernacular composition in India. The Puranas also help to develop the Hanuman narrative. There are stories of Hanuman's battle with Ravana, which is not found in the original text. And then in the course of time, what happens is Rama's sort of presence in temple imagery develops from around the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries onwards. And you start to see naturally Hanuman's position in temples evolve in the same respect. But he does, I think, very soon thereafter, he does assume, as I say, a life of his own. So much so that people are worshipping Hanuman as an independent being, even potentially in some respects, separate from worship to Rama. Valmiki clearly sees Hanuman as an important being, but as fully subservient to and dependent on Rama. But in the course of time, there is this independent cult that is that develops around Hanuman, and you see this in disparate forms, right? Hanuman is close to those who are interested in martial arts, so you will see Hanuman popularly known as the patron deity of martial arts in India, wrestling. But he is loved by all classes, by both genders, and across India geographically. So I don't think it's controversial to say he's probably the most loved and most widely worshipped Hindu deity today.
If you were to pinpoint a few things of why the popularity of Hanuman specifically has grown in the past few years, what would you say, that they were?
I think there are a couple of things. The rise of devotionalism more generally. So this is not let's say, the past few years, but I'm talking about the past few centuries, the Bhakti movement, right, really took India by force. And suddenly devotion to the supreme deity is being privileged over everything else. And Hanuman then is in some respects perfect, because he truly is the exemplary subservient devotee, right? No one can match his devotion to Rama.
Yeah.
And so he is positioned as the ideal devotee to follow. That, I think, played a key role in Hanuman's emergence as a very important deity. And then this is a monkey god who is playful, who is intelligent, but also incredibly strong.
Yeah.
Right? And so those desirous of strength naturally see in Hanuman, I think, of a very attractive being whose worship probably brings them great rewards. That's what I would say.
Yeah. And now that we've talked so much about, the male gods, male deities, now there was a part in the book that mentioned female deities and their first appearance. And also one thing that really fascinated me, now I'm not really sure, but if you could enlighten us on that, where there was some mention of Vishnu and, there was another female deity, and they talked about how the fingernail story or something like that, like an inference that they made to Vishnu. So if you could explain that to us.
Yeah, so this is around Devi and Devi's emergence. It's fair to say that while there are female deities mentioned in the Rig Veda, they do not assume certainly the significance that Devi comes to assume. Even in the early Upanishads, early Puranas, it's very much Vishnu and Shiva who are the supreme deities. But naturally, there was I think in the course of time, a cult developed around the goddess. The goddess formerly was seen as fully dependent on her male counterpart.
Yeah.
So Parvati on Shiva and Lakshmi on Vishnu. And in many respects, a lot of communities continue to view the female deities in that vein. But clearly there was a shift on the ground. Largely, I think, spurred by a range of political dynasties who started to position Devi as not dependent or subservient on any male counterpart, but potentially as the source of even them. And so you see this, and I think one great example of this is the story of Madhu and Ketava. These are two demons that are associated with Vishnu, traditionally, and it is Vishnu who is said to have killed both of them in one of his exploits. When the Devi Bhagavata is written and other texts sacred to the goddess, that story is reworked. And so instead, that Vishnu connection to these two deities is maintained. Madhu and Ketava are said to emerge from Vishnu's nostrils. But it is Devi who is ultimately responsible for their destruction. Vishnu is a mere instrument. And the genesis for all of this is the sort of this image of Devi as, in some respects, the composite power of all of the gods. All of the gods have come together and have channeled their energies and their weapons into this divine being. When I first read this story in the Devi Mahatmya, I thought, but if Devi is the product in some respects of all of the gods, then doesn't that mean she is subservient to them?
Right.
And the text actually, I think, anticipates that question. And it's very clear. That's why it goes on to say that she assumes so much power that even the male gods are baffled, and they then see in her their source.
I think that's particularly why the story of Mahishasura was also mentioned, where, I think, if I'm right to say, that Mahishasura was scary enough to drive away all the gods.
Absolutely.
And then, Devi emerged and she was able to be victorious.
Absolutely. And it's a very clever retelling of this very common trope in Sanskrit mythology, right? Usually what happens is a demon emerges on the block, terrifies the gods, who then approach Brahma, who then says, I can't do anything, you need to approach Vishnu, and Vishnu's position is therefore highlighted. What the redactors are doing in the context of Devi is actually saying, no, it's Devi who you have to go to. And so her ability to destroy Mahishasura, to subdue him, it showcases her enormous strength. But Devi, I think, so traditionally, obviously, her role in destroying Mahishasur, right? Mahishasur Mardini, one of the most iconic images of Devi in temples today. I think her personification of enormous strength is important, but it's also the fact that she is viewed in this very motherly way. Sure, she destroys, but she destroys evil. She is very motherly to those who approach her with love and affection. That's why I think she remains so popular a deity today.
Yeah, it's fascinating because all these stories, guys, trust me, I did not know anything about this, but everything I came to know from this book. So that's really fascinating, the whole, evolution of gods in general. Now I have a very interesting question that I'm not sure if you've thought about it, but you've covered the evolution of how gods were from back in the day to now. But now with AI on the rise and things like that, how do you see them evolving further?
It's a great question. It's a broad question. I really don't know how the gods will evolve. I think what will happen is we may start to see, and I think this could be a healthy development, is with the help of AI, a lot of the mythology come to light. I think be experienced in a more palpable way, right? Whether that's through art or media or cinema. We're seeing this in the form of cinema, where a lot of AI is used to retell the stories of the deities. But I see the any future evolution as primarily being centered on how is it that we can come to retell these stories in a way that is engaging for modern audiences. And I can see a role for AI there. How the gods will evolve in due course, I do not know. I think ultimately, they question maybe none of us can answer, frankly. But yeah.
Do you think AI or technology in general goes hand in hand with religion, or do you think it's kind of like a standoff kind of a thing?
Almost certainly goes hand in hand with religion. When we think of technology today, we think of computers and, as you say, artificial intelligence. But remember, the printing press was a technology, right? And the printing press played an absolutely enormous role in popularizing Sanskrit stories and vernacular stories, right? You think of what the Gita press has done for the Ramcharitmanas, right? It is thanks to the printing press, thanks to the role of the Gita press. They have published probably millions of copies of the Manas. There are very few households in the country that would not have a copy of some of the sacred texts. And previously, a few centuries ago, that wasn't possible, right? And so popularizing religion and allowing the populace at large to have access to the sacred text is something that technology allowed. Likewise, the other role I think AI will play, technology will play, is also making Sanskrit texts more accessible. It is very easy now. So, you use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, you can translate Sanskrit very, very easily in a way that is fairly authentic. I've tried it for myself. And that is, obviously I think something we should celebrate. Obviously be cautious of, but anything that makes religion more accessible to the common man, I think is good. I
mean, from everything like you said, from technology, the printing press coming up, and then religion being more accessible, like you mentioned. But now when you travel from local trains and things like that, you see people watching YouTube videos about religion. So it's definitely a lot more accessible now than it was back in the day.
100%. And I've been a voracious consumer of media related to religion, right? You can listen to professors give lectures. You can listen to traditional lectures on religion. So there is absolutely a role for technology to play, and I think that's the path forward. You think of also some of the great popular temples in India, Kashi Vishwanath and temples in Vrindavan. They have started to live stream darshan for the common people, which is also great.
And one thing now, since I have somebody who is so knowledgeable in Hinduism, so this is apart from the book, but I think it is something that touches upon another aspect, because me being somebody who is as born Catholic, and I practice Catholicism, and I'm not really a Hindu, but I have these frequent discussions with my Hindu friends,
right?
And there was one thing about there being a goddess and I did not know this. I have always been living in India, but something about parts of her body being across India and there being temples there. So that was really fascinating. So if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So this is the concept of the Shakti Pita. Is centered on a story found in almost every major Hindu epic, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the Puranas. And it's a story of Sati and her ill treatment by Daksha. So Daksha is Sati's father. Sati was formerly the consort of Shiva. Shiva and Sati are seated together, enjoying themselves in Shiva's divine abode. And Sati happens to see the gods and their retinue travel to Daksha's fire sacrifice. Daksha is having this fire sacrifice, a puja. He has not invited his son-in-law, Shiva, because he regards him as uncouth, right? He regards him as not fit for an assembly of esteemed people. Again, this goes back to Shiva as being, in some respects, this outsider, right? As being, as having an association with the lowly. And so Daksha wants nothing to do with Shiva, and he doesn't care how his daughter feels about this. And so Sati says to Shiva, let's go. Look, my father is having this fire sacrifice. All of the gods are going. We should go too. And Shiva tells his wife, we've not been invited, we shouldn't go. Sati says, look, it doesn't matter. You don't need an invitation from your father. And so she resolves to go, to attend. Shiva doesn't. Sati attends the sacrifice, and straight away Daksha insults her and insults Shiva. There is no position for Shiva in the assembly. And this is very richly and historically, this is very, very important. This again, I think, is probably evidence of how early Vedic communities thought of Shiva, right? The fact that in Daksha is not just an ordinary being. He's obviously father of Sati, but he's also one of the great Prajapatis, one of the great progenitors of mankind. And Daksha sees no place for Shiva in the pantheon, which is probably a reflection of, as I say, of how early Vedic communities saw Shiva. They view him as an outsider. So Sati is obviously insulted. Her husband is deeply insulted. Daksha issues very harsh words against Shiva. And Sati then says, and she resolves that she says to her, in front of all of the gods, she says to her father, this body of mine you have given me. I want nothing to do with it. And so she decides to immolate herself in the fire. That is where the concept of Sati emerges. And so Sati immolates herself in the fire. Shiva comes to know about this, and he utterly loses it. A divine madness emerges from him, and he attends the sacrifice. He picks up the burnt body of his wife, and he dismembers it, and he dances this dance of destruction. And in this dance, different body parts of the goddess fall on different parts of the earth, largely actually in India. And so the eyes fall somewhere, and that place becomes Naina Devi, which actually is my Kul Devi. Her womb falls in Kamakhya, so she's worshipped as Kamakhya there. And different parts of her body fall, as I say, in different parts of India, and all of those places become, I think there are 52 Shakti Pitas. But it's a wonderful story. Shiva then, as I say, this divine madness emerges from him. Different beings emerge from him. The concept of Kal Bhairav, right? These different very ghastly manifestations of Shiva emerge, and they destroy the assembly, and all present. And they say, you stood by while my wife was insulted. And Daksha is, his head is initially severed, and then his head is replaced. So he's brought back to life. But that story, it's obviously a very, very powerful mythological tale. But I think it's telling you, it's doing more than that. It's also telling you about a change in Shiva's position. Right? What you're seeing here is, I think, encapsulated in story form, the shifting position of Shiva. Here is somebody who was not seen to be fit to sit in that assembly, right? He was seen as an outsider. That's why Daksha doesn't invite him.
Yeah.
By the end of the tale, everyone resolves, including Daksha, that actually Shiva is very, very important. And so what you're seeing there is this evolution in his conception that is mapped out in story form.
That's absolutely fascinating, because when we have these conversations, and of course I think everybody should have these conversations, doesn't matter the religion, these stories, these epics that come from our culture in India
Absolutely.
have to be discussed.
Yes.
Overall, doesn't matter what religion you practice, it should be discussed overall widely between people. And I think with the coming generations, it's becoming a lot more, I would say, people are getting a lot more open to discuss about it.
I agree. Right? Which is good, which is healthy.
Yeah, because previously I think in India it was just a compartmentalization of religion separately, and you don't discuss cross-religion stuff. But I think it's now become more popular. One more thing now, particularly that I was really curious about, so this is extremely a selfish question, but Shiva is said to grant boons, but it's meant to, has like a kind of a careless feel to it.
Yes.
That he's just able to grant boons carelessly without evaluating if the person is going to be worth it or not. Yeah.
I think there are two things at work here. One is the story is designed to show how gracious Shiva is. He is known as Ashutosh, the one who is easily pleased. And so, yes, he grants these boons, and he grants them probably to unworthy recipients. But he does so because he is so easily pleased, and he is so gracious, and he is so, so wonderful in that respect. I think the other aspect here is typically when Shiva grants these boons to unworthy recipients who then end up misusing these boons, who steps in to help? It's typically Vishnu, right? So what this story is designed to do is to show it doesn't matter. Sometimes even the other gods mess up, but Vishnu is on hand to help.
Yeah.
So there are two ways I think of thinking about it. I mean, look, my honest take is I think Shiva knows what he is doing. There is a logic to even him granting a boon to, there's that famous story of him granting a boon to a Rakshasa who says, I should have the ability that whoever's head I touch will perish. And Shiva says, Tathastu, you can have that boon.
Wow.
And of course that demon then runs after Shiva to say, let me touch your head. And I think it is Vishnu who steps in to say, I mean, everybody's concerned what's going to happen. Yeah. So Vishnu steps in and says to the Rakshasa that surely you don't really believe that this boon works. And the Rakshasa says, of course, Shiva has granted it. Vishnu says, Shiva grants all forms of things, they don't work. And Vishnu says, if you really believe in it, why don't you just try it? Put your hand on your head. Yeah. Of course, the demon does that and his head perishes.
Wow.
So that is also Vishnu, enacting his role as agent of salvation.
Yeah, yeah. And isn't it that Shiva also granted Ravana his power?
That is correct. He is Shiva's greatest devotee, which is absolutely not accurate at all. He does worship Shiva, with a great deal of ardor and austerity. But it is selfishly motivated. It's not pure devotion. And the Shaivite tradition will never view Ravana as an exemplary devotee in that respect. But that I think that shows you the power of tapasya, right? Of austerity. But it's ambivalent, right? Because great power can be used to do great things, good and bad. And many choose to choose to utilize that power or those boons in negative ways. Yeah. Ravana's a prime example of that. But you're quite right. Shiva is the one indeed who grants Ravana his a lot of his power. Yeah.
Now, lastly, I just want to come back to the book, and before we tell the audience why they should be reading the book. I mean, I think we've given more than 100 reasons of why they should, based on the stories and everything that we've discussed. But you talk about the evolution of gods and how gods are either created or they develop into different beings. And there's something fascinating that you've mentioned about culture changes, but not only culture changes, but also, let's say, as an example that you've given, when they need rain, then they kind of create or manifest a certain god. And could you explain, overall how that came to be?
Yes. So my central thesis in the book is that the gods are dynamic beings. They are responding to the needs of their devotees. If you think of, even communities that have just settled into, agrarian communities, right? You think of the transition of Vedic Aryans from these nomadic wanderers into settled agrarian communities, right? Rain is phenomenally important. Irrigation, you need to irrigate your crops. And so you will see, clearly there's a need for rain, and you will see in the divine, a number of things, but you will see, because it's such a palpable need, I'll start to, I think it's very natural that you start to identify the divine with, as the provider of that which you need the most, right? And if you need rain, then surely the most important deity is the one who provides rain. And so Indra obviously assumes that position. It's not that rain is not important anymore, of course it is. And Indra continues in some respects to have that position as god of rain today. But clearly that wasn't the most pressing need as the centuries evolved, and people started to reflect, I think, more philosophically on the position of the gods, on what was most important. And it's ultimately, the rise of Buddhism and Jainism as well, I think, provided a bit of impetus in this direction. As, particularly Brahmin communities came together and thought more critically about ritual, about sacrifice, and about the role of contemplation in religion, about the importance of self-realization. I think the role of the likes of Indra and Varuna declined. And they declined, I think, pretty rapidly soon after the earlier strata of Vedic literature was created. And we can maybe even cite one example if that's helpful. As I say, the Rig Veda highlights Indra's position. Indra and Agni are given pride of place, I think, in the Rig Veda. By the time you come to the Bhagavad Purana, right, 2 days after Deepavali, or 1 day after Deepavali, we celebrate a festival known as Govardhan Puja, or Ankut, which is the tale ultimately of Krishna's saving of his, the people of Vrindavan from the torrential downpour that Indra is said to have unleashed. The story is that there was an annual rite celebrated by the inhabitants of Vrindavan to propitiate Indra with great offerings. And Krishna, as a young boy, says to his father, "Why are we doing this? Instead we should make these offerings to the hill, Govardhan, which is a sacred hill, a sacred mountain. And we should make these offerings to the cows. Ultimately, that's what is giving us this abundance, and not to Indra." Indra grows absolutely irate. And so he sends for 7 days this downpour. Krishna, to protect his family and his friends, he lifts up Govardhan Hill on his little finger. And to celebrate that festival, we celebrate Govardhan Puja and Ankut. Indra then, ultimately after the 7 days, the downpour is over, he comes to realize his mistake. And he comes and he prays to Krishna. And it's a very sort of servile depiction of Indra in the texts. But you just think, what has happened? A god, the most powerful, the most important, the most petitioned god in the Rig Veda, comes to assume this fairly lowly position in one of the most important Puranas. And I think that is the evolution at play. And that's ultimately what this book is designed to trace.
Wow. And I'm so excited for all of you guys to read it. It's coming out again, June 2026. And you're probably watching it in June. It's recorded a little bit prior to that. But definitely check out Hindu Gods. It's available on Amazon. It's available on every other bookstore you'll find across India and the Indian subcontinent. Now, Anuj, for somebody who is just starting to discover Hinduism, whether it's early in their life or probably a lot later, they've just found an interest in Hinduism. What would you say to them? And if you can look at the camera and just tell them exactly how they should get started, how your book will be instrumental, all of that.
I think this book will be of interest to anybody who is intrigued by questions of how religion interacts and evolves as a result of societal and political forces. That's ultimately what I have set out to do in this book, focusing specifically on the trajectories of Hindu gods. I'm hopeful that this book will have a broader interest, including to those who are not necessarily Hindus. A lot has been done in Christian circles to understand how it is that the figure of Jesus was evolved in the course of time with the church fathers, and then obviously with the arrival of the Protestant Reformation. We've not had that much interest, I think, and sustained focus on similar questions in Hinduism. So I'm really hopeful that this book will, as I said at the outstart, will serve as a conversation starter. There are many questions that are probed in this book. I hope that you find the responses that I provided persuasive. If you're interested in learning more about Hinduism, I think this is a great place to start. But ultimately, there is no substitute, I think, for encountering the sacred text for yourselves, whether that's in the original, but also in translation. There are very good English translations available, which you should read. So that is, I think, my 2 cents on where to start.
Definitely. And I'm once again super to read Hindu gods. So go ahead and get your copy today. And one important thing is that as soon as you read it, Anuj is very, very open to take any kinds of questions. So Anuj, what's your social media? If you could tell them if you have any Instagram or anything like that.
I do. Anuj Ghai 91 on Instagram and X. So I'm very, as Clinton said, very open to receiving questions. I'd love to engage with you as openly as possible.
Yeah, and definitely you can come up with your thoughts, and any thoughts that you have, you can comment down below in here as well, and that can be the start of a discussion already in the comments. If not, Anuj is always available. So are we at Jaico Publishing House. Follow us on Instagram and all social media that there is, and definitely get your copy today, and we're super excited. Do let us know what you think. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.